Welcome to our Tuesday, October 12th, 2021 regular closed session meeting for the EBMUD Board of Directors. In accordance with Government Code Section 54953E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar and teleconference only. A physical location will not be provided for this meeting. All directors, including myself, are participating remotely. Please give roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
I'm here.
President Lenny.
Here. We're now at public comment. If members of the public wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation, if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. Secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has concluded. Risha, do we have speakers for public comment?
I have no one on the line for public comment.
All right.
I have one hand for public comment. One moment. Yvette Rivera, you should be able to unmute your mic and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. I just want to thank you and Dana Mims for your work on getting me public documents. I still have to research whether some of the exemptions that General Counsel claimed are legitimate. I didn't get some information that I wanted, but I'll continue with my search. Years ago, Mr. Derek McDonald claimed that I wasn't entitled to see all of the merit bonuses and performance pay that's distributed throughout the district. I had to research case law then to prove that I was entitled to that information. As a result of my research then, I was able to obtain all of the copies of performance pay distributions since 2014. If anybody wants to see those, you can just email me at eastbaymudgal@gmail.com. Several of the documents I received yesterday were the government tort complaints filed by Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce. I'm going to read a few excerpts from those complaints if I don't run out of time. They filed it with EBMUD, and before I read that, I want to just tell people, it's a public service announcement, tell people what a government tort complaint is, because I've been asked by quite a few people. There's one document that the Sacramento Law Library puts out that says California Tort Claims Act. Before you can sue any public entity, you must first file a claim meeting the requirements of the California Tort Claims Act, Government Code 810 through 996.6. This law applies to public entities such as state, county, and local government agencies or departments, as well as government employees. The best document that there is in terms of how to educate yourself about what a government tort complaint is a lawsuit that I read many years ago. And it was a demurrer filed by EBMUD against an employee that was trying to sue EBMUD. Just going to read an excerpt before I run out of time. EBMUD's demurrer on March 27th, EBMUD 27, 2013. EBMUD demurred to the First Amendment complaint on the grounds that it was barred by the Tort Claims Act. EBMUD argued that the act requires that any civil complaint for money or damages must be presented to and rejected by the pertinent public entity, here EBMUD. The limitations period for filing such a claim for personal injury damages is noted. It is noted as 6 months from the date of injury and 1 year for all other claims. According to the First Amendment complaint, EBMUD's wrongful acts occurred on January the 13th, 2010. As such, EBMUD argued that the employee had until January the 13th, 2011 to file a claim out of the investigation, which she failed to do. I'm going to go ahead and read now from the Ariel Bland unlawful discrimination
Yvette, your
tort
3 minutes
complaint
have,
that was filed.
Yvette, your 3 minutes actually have concluded, so if you can wrap up your
Thank you.
comments.
Thank you so much
All right,
for
thank you.
that. I appreciate your time.
I
That
have,
ends public, oh, I'm sorry.
I have another hand just raised for public comment. Nick Lawrence, you should be able to unmute your mic. Nick Lawrence, you should be able to unmute your mic. Okay, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Nick Lawrence, present episode 5 of The Dangerous Condition of Public Property. I can bifurcate the presentation into the afternoon session, but request approximately 5 minutes for my prepared remarks. But first, and to follow up, Mr. Scott Hill did promptly contact me to discuss my concerns about events at the Lafayette Reservoir. Thank you, Director Young. Secondly, and more importantly, today is a red flag day in the East Bay Hills, meaning a critical fire danger exists. And for over 18 months, the dangerous condition of public property, the district's outer surface fire hydrant, served by a puny, above-ground 2-inch rubber hose, still exists on Tappan Terrace in Orinda. Your packets today should contain photographs of those unsafe conditions. I'm here to remind you, elected officials and General Manager Chan, of this ongoing unsafe condition and to request your assistance. A bit of context is needed. After the dangerous condition had been allowed by EBMUD to exist for over a year, and following my written communication in early April 2021 to General Manager Chan, Mr. Jimmy Yoloyi, Director of Engineering and Construction, wrote to me, in effect, that, quote, the same pressure equates the same flow, quote, and he referred me to the Public Relations Department. Now, I may be many things, but stupid is not one of them. And as you all know, the company line that Jimmy told me was somewhere between merely disingenuous and lying under oath. So later, on April 21st, 2021, following my second letter to General Manager Chan, his brother, Carlton Chan, engineering manager, during our 33-minute telephone conversation, agreed with my assertion that the fire hydrant served by the puny 2-inch rubber hose was dangerous. And he offered and agreed that EBMUD would promptly set in place an 8-inch pipe protected against fire to restore the fire hydrant to its former condition. And he named Tykert Construction as the likely vendor, as they were already doing work in the area. 3 months later, during which time EBMUD failed to communicate with me about this promised work, and following my further inquiry, Mr. Michael Ambrose, manager of maintenance and construction, called me. During our 20-minute conversation on July 7th, 2021, he repeated Jimmy's disinformation and likewise attempted to convince me that the same pressure equates to the same flow. This nonsense serves to impeach any expert or professional opinions Mr. Ambrose might be tempted to render. Now I've learned that the delay in EBMUD's performance may be self-inflicted due to its non-public plan to relocate the fire hydrant and permanently reduce the size of its water supply from 8 inches to 6 inches. I object to both aspects of this plan, as it would move the fire hydrant hundreds of feet further from and diminish the value of my house, would affect the cost of my insurance, degrade the hydrant's performance, and impede fire department access to it. Further, you must know, the likelihood of EBMUD securing the additional easements and permits for such a plan lay somewhere between slim and non-existent. While red flag day critical fire risks or fire conditions are upon us, and my home and my family and those of my neighbors remain at elevated risk due to the dangerous condition of public property which the district allows to continue.
Mr. Lawrence, your 3 minutes have concluded, so if you could please wrap up your comments.
I think I have 4. I can conclude them now or this afternoon as you wish.
You can wrap up your comments. Your 3 minutes have already concluded.
As I said, I have 4 or 5 sentences of prepared remarks. I can repeat them now or I can sign in this afternoon, which is the board.
You have 4 or 5 sentences, you said?
I did.
Doug, if you could allow Mr. Lawrence to conclude his remarks, I would appreciate it.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much. According to Zillow, the 6 homes on Tappan Terrace, those most affected by the dangerous condition, have an aggregate value in excess of $15 million. A fire in this area, if made worse by the suspected condition of public property, will be very costly for EBMUD, and if harm or loss of life were involved, even worse. Now, 2 episodes ago, Director Coleman requested a memo about the fire resistance of the 2-inch rubber hose presently in place. I'm told that memo does not exist. I assume this is because somebody rubber stamped it draft or routed it through legal in order to preclude public review thereof. This behavior by staff should cause embarrassment. My concerns are exacerbated by the presence of an on-site above-ground PG&E compressed gas tank, the size of a small truck, immediately adjacent to the 2-inch rubber hose. My 5 appearances have been before you have been to ask, and I repeat that ask, that you please restore the prior level of performance of fire hydrant H14100 on Tappan Terrace, and do it now. Thank you for your time. Oh, one more thing. Shouldn't there be on the vinyl hoses serving 319 and 324 Tappan Terrace be equipped with anti-siphon or anti-backflow preventer devices as required on outdoor fixtures to prevent other domestic users on Tappan Terrace and elsewhere from the risk of cross-contamination? Maybe I could hear from somebody about that. Thank you for the extension of time. It's appreciated. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you.
Are there other speakers?
I have an additional hand. Give me one moment. Eric L., you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good morning. This is Eric Larson. President Lenny and board members, I actually wasn't prepared necessarily to speak before you went into closed session, but I have been helping to the best of my ability a number of members who well, quite frankly, their mental health has been impacted by the whole COVID pandemic, maybe other additional extenuating circumstances going on for people. This has been a very difficult time for a lot of people to manage, and I want to request that you consider in closed session when you discuss the COVID vaccination policy that you grant FMLA leave or or long-term leave without pay for your employees as an alternative for them to avoid being charged with insubordination for failure to follow the COVID vaccination policy. Please provide some alternatives for your employees who don't have a clear religious or medical exemption and neither want to be insubordinate and want to keep their job here at the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any other speakers?
There are no other speakers for public comment.
All right, then we will now convene to discuss closed session agenda items and return here for our regular board meeting, hopefully at 1:15. Great, thank you, Risha, and welcome everyone to our Tuesday, October 13th, 2021 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. In accordance with Government Section 54953, subsection E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar and teleconference only. A physical location has not been provided for this meeting. The Upper Mokelumne River Watershed Authority met on October 1st, and the Planning Committee met this morning. These items will report out under item 12. All directors, including myself, are participating remotely. Roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman,
Present.
Director Katz,
Present.
Director McIntosh,
Here.
Director Mellon,
Present.
Director Patterson,
Present.
Director Young,
Unmute yourself.
I am here. Thank you. Sorry.
I
President
know I can
Linden.
see you. I'm present. If you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There are no announcements from closed session. We're now on to public comment. If the members of the public wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard first, and then comments on agenda items will be heard at the time that item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend that time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will track time and inform each speaker when their allotted time has concluded. Risha, do we have speakers?
At the moment, we have one speaker for public comment, Kelly A. You should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Kelly, if you don't mind, before you start, and Risha can start the clock, I just wanted to make a brief note. I know that this is an important part of our board meeting to have these public comments. And sometimes people are I think we're all feeling a little bit grumpy sometimes about things that are going on, whether it's affecting us personally or whether just affecting the world. Whether it's the COVID that's keeping us indoors or other things. But I just want to say it's very important that in these public comments, and this goes for both sides, that we show the mutual respect that we have for each other, both in the public and employee comments that are being made to us, as well as from the directors, the respect for the commenters on really any topic that they have to speak on. And this is really a time that we don't try to limit what you say or how you say it or what subject you're talking about. But I just want to make a special appeal today because I know things can get hot, and I know we've seen examples in other forums, particularly at public schools and stuff, where things get out of hand, and it just doesn't have to be that way to be part of our democratic process. So I greatly appreciate this time period and appreciate the comments that our employees and members of the public have made towards us, but want to make a special appeal for mutual respect. So thank you for that, and you can go ahead, Kelly.
Okay. Well, this round of redistricting, which is coming up in April as a deadline, now has a new set of rules called the Fair Maps Act. Of course, none of those rules really bind or apply or legally restrict your actions of this board, but you have adopted them. The ad hoc committee has paid homage to these as being some type of best practices. So let's take a look. You know, the last set of district boundaries were drawn before the Fair Maps Act was ever heard of or conceived, which it was only adopted a year or two ago. And the last set of district boundaries, you know, I know the southern area of East Bay Mud. I know the Costco Business Center on A Street in Hayward, and that is discontiguous. It's cut off from, it has two rectangles that meet at a point. That's called discontinuity and needs to be addressed. Well, it doesn't need to be addressed. I mean, you can leave it alone, but it would not conform with the Fairmax Act. Also, the Norris Canyon Estates, that seems to be disconnected from the rest of the ward. It might have some natural affiliation with San Ramon, but that's not recognized in the current ward boundaries. Really, the guidelines that came out of the ad hoc committee, the number 2 guideline there is something about incumbent protection. The ward boundaries, wards of current incumbents shall be maintained. And in order to carry that out, in order to make the present board members, make them more secure, more comfortable in their current seats, we need to figure out where are the precincts, these 7 precincts. We need to identify them, we need to map them, and we're going to be using them as the starting point for this next round of redistricting. That's going to be the basis for all the new districts are going to be based around the homes of the present incumbents, based on the current rules. And I think we all here in the public need to be working towards that goal of making the incumbents more secure, more comfortable in their current seats. And that's the only way to do that is by having that very well mapped out. This kind of compliance with incumbent protection is now enshrined in the current guidelines. Thank you.
I have a question for Kelly, please.
Go ahead.
Kelly, do you reside within the East Bay MUD territory?
I'm a proud customer, as I've emailed you in the past, a proud customer of ACWD, the Alameda County Water District, right here in the Bay Area, within the watershed of San Francisco Bay. So that's my affiliation, sir.
And I don't remember, are they set up by districts?
They are going to be talking about that tonight at 8 p.m. Why don't you call in? They're going to be setting up their districts for the very first time. And we'll see if they have incumbent protection at the top of their list.
And one last question, the group that you're with, if I understand correctly, that group has many members in it that reside in areas that don't have districts. Am I correct?
Well, not all it really depends on when the lawyers sue each individual district. That's what's, as people get sued, for example, the city of Fremont received a threat of a lawsuit 4 years ago, and then they converted over to districts. So it just depends on how these greedy lawyers operate. That's all, in my opinion.
Thank you so much.
If I may, John, just before I'll call on you in a second, I just want to clarify here. There isn't a rule about incumbent protection, so to speak, or making incumbents more comfortable. The rule has to do with making sure that there isn't an effort or to draw the line so that a current incumbent is drawn out of their currently represented district. But it's not intended to be a rule that says, oh, it has to be has to make them more comfortable or more reelectable. There's no rules about that. John?
Thank you, Doug. And I was going to sort of go off on that, but I think what needs to be highlighted for over 40 years, I believe East Bay MUD has had districts on the forefront of many agencies and areas within the Bay Area, and we've done well with it. It's not incumbent protection. It's making sure that we do not gerrymander and write somebody out of an office like it has happened previously in California. It's happening in Texas. It's happening in other places where people, the majority of the board decides they don't want somebody on the board, so they write them out of a district or a represented area that they live. That's what we're doing. They still have to run on their own volition, on their own merits, and it's really to make sure that we are not playing gerrymandering like others have played gerrymandering by writing somebody out of a district or a ward in our case.
Right. Thank you. All right, next speaker.
One moment, we have, get that person up. We have Eric L. Eric, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Well, thank you, Risha. I wanted to speak on item number 7. Consent item number 7.
Okay,
All right, we'll come back to you with that.
and I see no other hands at this moment. I
All
just
right.
have another hand that popped up. Yvette Rivera, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes
Thank you,
will
Risha.
start now.
Thank you, Risha. This morning, I talked about several public documents. I said I was in possession of the performance pay data from 2014 through 2021, and how I obtained that data after Derek McDonald said I couldn't have it. After researching case law, I was able to obtain that data. The reason I bring it up is because public documents are a right of the public, and sometimes East Bay MUD will say that they can withhold documents. I was able to just research case law and get those documents. I also talked this morning about the Government Tort Act and how yesterday I obtained Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce's government tort complaints. Those government tort complaints had to be turned in before they could file lawsuits. I don't want to run out of time this afternoon, but if anybody wants any information about what I talked about this morning, they can just review the tape, which will be posted on the East Bay MUD website. For right now, I'm going to read one section of Saji Pierce's government tort complaint, the section under unlawful retaliation. In late 2019, claimant learned that Mr. Spencer had engaged in an active campaign to place her in a false light. On February 20th, 2020, she reported to Laura Costa, the district's human resources manager, that Mr. Spencer had made a number of false statements about her, which he knew to be false at the time he made the statements. Examples include that she threatened to file a complaint against him if he did not give her an exceptional rating, that she had been unwilling to take on work outside of her assigned areas, that she had poor communication skills, and that the general manager had commented on how extremely disappointed he was in her poor communication. These statements were false and intended to and did disparage her character and damage her reputation and career. I'm going to stop there because I'm going to be at the district for another 5 years, and I can continue reading these until I retire. Other than that, I just want people to know that if anybody wants to know the perils of not filing a government tort complaint on time, you just have to look at the Felicia Collier versus East Bay MUD case, which I believe Lourdes Matthews was involved in. And in that case, it pretty much spells out every reason why you should ensure that you have your filings, government tort complaint filed on time. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, any other speakers, Risha?
I have no other hands for public comment.
All right, thank you. We'll go on to consent agenda then. And as our custom, we'll pull item 7 because we have a speaker to speak on that. Any other items that board members want to pull for further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, we might pull item 1. I'm
All
sorry,
right.
item 3.
Item 3. All right, items 3 and 7. Do I have a motion for the other ones?
I
So
would
moved.
so move. I'll
Second.
second.
All right, we have motions and seconds. And we'll have a roll call vote
I would like to,
on items, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 4 through 6, and 8 and 9.
so we had a motion by Director Coleman, and who was the second? Director Mellon. Okay,
Director Mellon.
Go ahead, Frank.
got it.
Oh,
Okay, roll call
thank you,
vote.
Bill.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, Bill, you asked for item number 3.
For clarification, I see that the low bidder opted out, and I just wanted to make sure that process was understood. If we might have staff inject that.
Jimmy Aloya is here. He could answer those questions.
Yes, Director Patterson, the low bidder was Angati, and they, shortly after the bids were received, they requested to withdraw because they had made a clerical error in their bid. The staff checked the situation. They had made an arithmetic error in adding up the dollars in their bid, and so what they had put in their bid was not what they actually wanted to bid for the project, and so we consented to, we recommend that we consent to their withdrawal of their bid and move to the second low bidder, McGuire and Hester.
Yes, I just thought it was good to clarify that in case anybody ever questioned. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so Bill, you want to move the item?
I would move the item.
All right, second, Frank? I saw you undo the mute there, all right. So let's have a roll call on item number 3.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, that brings us to item number 7. I believe Eric Larson was going to address us on that. So I'll let him go first.
Eric, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Thank you, Risha. Good afternoon. Thank you, President Lenny and board members. Local 444 was not notified of this contract in advance, and I only saw the notification yesterday afternoon. So I haven't had a chance to discuss our concerns with staff. And it, you know, it may really be a non-issue, and I sure hope that it is, but if I could just take the opportunity now to express 444's concern that Local 444 represented wastewater plant operators and plant maintenance mechanics do not interface with contractors short of receiving training and operations and maintenance materials. I just wanted to provide that we will object to operators having to monitor the goings-on of contractors or to take directions from contractors. Where I'm concerned is in the discussion where it states in the last sentence of the first paragraph and the beginning of the second paragraph that the consultants would ensure the bypass pumping system is installed in accordance with project specifications and would conduct weekly field verification to ensure proper operations and maintenance. District staff would perform the contract stuff except when district staff is unavailable for anticipated night or weekend work or due to other project commitments. As you know, storms come in any time of day or night, and us operators are out there anytime, day or night, operating those facilities as needed. And our operators should only be taking directions directly from our direct supervisor, whom we report to, and not be required to interface in with contractors in any other way than receiving training or operations and maintenance materials. That's all. Thank you.
Clifford, do you have any kind of comment or?
It looks like Director Coleman also raised his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Doug. I was actually going to pull this item, so thank you, Eric, for asking some questions on it. I was pretty amazed by when I saw basically what the cost overruns are to increase the contract by nearly $300,000. And we've had 3 amendments previous. The original contract in 2018 was just over $1 million. So this is nearly a 30% increase based on that contract. And really, I want to know why we're having such high cost overruns and contract changes. What the reasoning is and where the accountability lies for us and with the groups who are basically issuing a contract, are required to implement the contract, and then we have such high cost overruns, which leads me to wanting to have, at least if I can, going back over the last 2-3 years, a memo on any cost overruns of over 25% and the reasoning why we have them and how we're trying to fix this. This is really not acceptable when we're looking at issuing contracts and then having constant cost overruns. I understand their materials in particular right now have come into play, but I don't know if this is as much as a material issue as what. And really, what is our accountability to the ratepayers when we were issuing a contract 3 years ago for $1 million, and now we're looking at 1.8 million for a contract?
Thank you, Director Coleman. Eileen, would you like to respond to the comments?
Sure. Excellent questions, Director Coleman, and I'd like to respond to your comments, and then I'd also like to respond to Eric's and clarify any misunderstandings. So let's just start off with what Pump Station is. It's on Harbor Bay Isle in Alameda, and it was originally built by a private developer before being transferred to the district in the late 1980s. The pump station is quite deep, and it requires extensive strengthening. The pump station is, when we talk about aging infrastructure, is a perfect example of our aging infrastructure. There's been a number of unforeseen occurrences. They found along the estuary where the force main crosses over to the main island of Alameda. The existing force main was much deeper than shown on drawings and was covered by an existing high voltage power line and other utilities not shown on the record drawings. Remember, the district did not design this. We got this from a developer in the 80s. So basically, these required a lot of extra work. So the original consultant agreement, and you're correct, was for about $1 million, and it was for design and engineering services during construction. This assumed one bid package for the pump station and force main, and structural rehab of the wet well was not anticipated due to the code nonconformance at the time of construction. However, after extensive outages and after detailed inspections going to confined spaces, we found additional seismic work and work that needed to be done. So then we got into Amendment 1, which was $150,000, which is significant. And that was for additional structural design and field investigations for inspection of the wet well in a confined space. It also became evident that the existing structure did not meet design codes when it was constructed. And as I said, we did not have good record drawings because we got this from a developer. This wasn't designed by district engineers. So this required more extensive structural rehab work. The mechanical scope was also expanded to include full replacement of the pumps and piping within the pump station. Then comes Amendment 2 for $343,000. So additional engineering services during construction to address the underground utility conflicts that weren't reflected in the design drawings that we inherited from the developer for the force main at the estuary crossing, and to provide a second design package for bidding and force main work separate from the pump station work. We decided to separate the projects out. You'll remember that on December 16th of last year, we ended up with a sanitary sewer overflow as a result of this aging infrastructure plant. So we decided we can't have another sanitary sewer overflow where we had raw sewage go into the estuary. So we've slowed the project down and we broke it into 2 different components. So Amendment 3 was expanded odor control system design and permitting effort. We also expanded the design services for the temporary bypass pumping system and additional coordination for electrical design, drafting, and project management. So we have now put a bells and whistle bypass pumping. This is going to be shut down for 6 months. And remember, this is pumping the sewage off of Alameda Bay Farm Island and getting it to the main wastewater treatment plant. So we now have portable pumps. We have 2 diesel generators that will be on site in case of an emergency. And we will also have communications back to the main plant. So following the sanitary sewer overflow, since we've now extended the contract, so it will be 2 years instead of 1 year. We also needed to extend, and this kind of gets back to what's within the scope of the work, as Eric alluded to. And so this particular amendment for $276,000 includes additional construction support. So it's not 444 work. And we did notify Local 2019 and Local 21 on August 12th of this year of this contract amendment. And so let me go through to clarify what the contract amendment for. There's about 200 hours for construction inspection labor, and that's to supplement our own staff who will be the construction inspectors on the project, but we're anticipating night work and weekend work doing low flow events. This is very tricky because we have to continue to operate Pump Station M while the work is being done. We've also included, and this is once again why 2019 was notified, consultant support will provide engineering labor to perform technical evaluations as needed of the contractor's bypass pumping system. They're going to make sure the bypass pumping system includes pumps for dry weather and the wet weather season flows to the station, mechanical piping, primary electrical power, and backup power generation, and instrumentation for system remote monitoring and alarms to the contractor and district staff. So basically the contractor is responsible for operating this, but we're having an engineer, our consultant who designed this robust backup system to take the place of this pumping plant that is a key pumping plant during construction, to be there during startup, which could take 1 to 2 weeks. And then this engineer on record is going to be there throughout the bypass operation. We'll visit the site 2 to 3 times per week. So that is the bulk of this and why it's been such a complicated project. And I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Well, I appreciate we do not want to have another sewer overflow for a lot of reasons. I guess it really begs the question when we're issuing contracts like this, which are large, complex contracts, how in detail do we go looking at the engineering specs designs that we're given in order to make sure that when we're accepting something, whether it be from a private developer or from another entity, that we're not going to be saddled with unnecessary cost? And as a result of this, how much effort has gone into it, and how can we change it to minimize this sort of problem going forward so the financial issues are not put on our backs as a result, since we probably have no way to recover these costs from the private developer who built it?
And I think that's an excellent question, Director Coleman, and I agree with you. I can't speak. I was still in school back in the 80s when the district took over this pumping plant, so I can't speak
so
to
was
that.
I.
So I can't speak to how much review of the drawings, but I can tell you what we did get was not accurate, and we're paying the price our ratepayers are now, and that's what's resulted in why the project has been so complex, because the information we got was not accurate.
So going forward, not on this project, and maybe this is to Clifford and to the folks that work for him, the standpoint of how we can change our process going forward so that we have greater accountability when we're reviewing the specs and the issues that we're receiving or the bids that we're going to be going out. And again, I'd like to know, going back over the last 3 years, approximately anything over 25% cost overruns, what they are, why they had them, what happened, and how we fixed them.
Yeah, and Director Coleman, we can certainly provide you information. We do produce regular reports when we go issue change orders to contracts. And maybe to your first, so we can provide a summary for you and the board on that. The other thing I think to point out, I won't say where I was in the 80s in terms of schooling, but going forward, when you look at some of the work that we do, Alameda Point, I think is a very good example. Some board members have been involved in that. where we have not accepted that project or that site to be incorporated in the East Bay MUD until they upgrade it to our standards so that we don't burden our ratepayers with these costs. So, we have, for a lot of these projects where they want us just to take their facilities, we have pushed back until they agreed to provide a system up to our standards. So that's what we're doing today going forward. But back in the 80s, as Eileen says, we don't know what evaluation they did. But we can certainly provide you with change orders that we've issued to construction contracts for the last 3 years.
And that's great. And then again, what are we doing going forward to minimize the amount of change orders that we're going to have for the future?
And we can include that within the memo as well.
Eric has additional comments.
Thank
Eric,
you.
you have your hand raised again?
Yes, my speaker on?
Yes.
Yes.
Terrific, thank you. And thank you for recognizing me again. Thanks for your response, Eileen. A lot of quite complex, a lot of information going on there on a very complex project and complex systems. One thing that you said, and perhaps you misspoke, was that the contractor was going to be operating the bypass equipment. Is that right? Then 444 absolutely should have been notified, and 444 objects to this contract because we were not notified. Operating any bypass equipment, operating whether it's contractor provided pumps and machinery, we absolutely should have been notified. And local 444 strongly objects to moving forward with this project until we have an opportunity to negotiate over our work, operation of our interceptor systems and pump stations, which is our represented core bargaining unit work. We absolutely should have been notified of this project beforehand and had an opportunity, been given an opportunity to bargain over whether or not that is appropriate to contract that work out. I would implore the board to insist that right at this moment, you get a clear indication of what liability the contractors would be liable for if there is any sanitary sewer overflow. 444 absolutely protests contracting our core bargaining work out.
And maybe I can clarify, Eric, since the contractor is responsible for building the system, we're planning to have them operate it, and we're planning to have oversight of it, because ultimately, if there is an SSO, it's still the district SSO, but it gets complicated. Our engineers were talking about if they construct it and then there's an issue and we're operating it, they can say we caused it versus them. So we're trying to keep the responsibility with the contractor, knowing that we're going to have this engineer out there checking it regularly. Our own staff will still be, quote, somewhat overseeing it, but we wanted to have the operation to be with the contractor who's actually building it. And as you know, it's pretty.
And give us an opportunity to discuss that at the contracting out committee. We absolutely protest contracting this work out at this time.
I would agree with Eric on that.
Yeah, it does seem like something that at least is worthy of discussion that way.
And I'm happy to follow up and talk with Eric.
Is this something at this point that decision is too far down the road to remedy if there's a different thing that comes out of the meet and confer, or?
Well, at this time, the contract that's before you today, I want to clarify, is not for operations of the system. The contract that's before you today, this Fourth Amendment, is for engineering support to make sure that the contractor builds the bypass system in conformance with the design drawings and specs. And it also includes for the contractor. So it's not 444 work that's included in the contract amendment that's before you today. It's 2019 work, engineering work, and also construction inspection work.
So what you're saying, Eileen, sorry, Doug, is that you'll meet and confer with Eric at 444 on the operation side?
Yes.
Okay.
And,
We should have been notified of the past contracts, which we were not notified of the previous contract. If this contract is just the construction management and construction inspection of the bypass facility that's going to be built and operated by contractors, we were not notified in the previous contract, if that's the case.
So we can follow up, Eric, you and I, and have a discussion on the operations of the bypass system. I'm happy to have that dialogue with you and meet with you. But I just want to be clear, that's separate from what this contract amendment is for engineering services doing construction for the bypass pumping system and for supplementing our contract, our district staff who are overseeing the construction will not always be able to inspect it, especially when it's nights and weekends. And so it's the supplemental construction inspection.
Marguerite?
yeah, so here's my question, is if the consideration of who's operating these facilities has always been that it would be operated by a contractor, would versus operated by, district staff, would anything about what has happened within the contract to date be different? In other words, at what point would the work being done by the contractor change or diverge based on whether district forces were operating the facility or not?
So
An understandable question.
it's complex. It's complex. It's a great question, Director Young. It's complex. So basically, we're going to be taking this pump station out of service, and it's up to the contractor to go ahead and provide this bypass pumping. So basically, we're bypassing this important pump station in Alameda. And then the way it's going to work is, since he's responsible for building it, we don't want him saying, well, you guys didn't operate it right when he didn't. It's got to function as designed. And so
that's not what I'm asking, though. I understand what the rationale is that you're using to support the project being operated by non-district forces, and that certainly would and should be a conversation that happens with 444, because that is their work at that point. What you're saying is that at this point, no 444 work has been contracted out or is being paid for under contract services. It's still the design and construction. But at the point where you flip the switch and you turn that pumping station, right now the pumping station is being operated by district forces, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so at some point when you flip that switch, it's no longer being operated by district forces, correct?
Well, yeah, I guess well, I should clarify. So when they build it, we're holding them accountable. The contractor, I should say, we're going to have district staff out there because we're ultimately responsible. So we're having this engineer that's contract engineer. We're going to have ops, Eric, who gave the wet weather presentation this morning. He will be out there to make sure, because we're ultimately responsible. Once it stabilizes, then it's hopefully, in the beginning, we might have to have people monitor it 24/7. And whether that's district staff or a contractor, we haven't gone to that level of detail at this point. So I think maybe that's what you're asking, Director Young.
I'm just trying to understand where I land on if we're taking a vote, where I land on the question. It seems like at some point 444's work is definitely implicated in the project, and better to get that sorted out, now versus later. And if it doesn't hold things up too much, it makes sense just to do that versus acting on the contract today, on the contract extension today.
And Director Young, and Eileen, maybe this is a question that you're asking. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Eileen, is there anything about the contract today that would change whether or not this facility was going to be operated by 444 staff or the contractor?
No, not this contract today, no.
Okay, that is my question. That was my question. Thank you for clarifying it, Clifford. Then
I wanted to,
I'd be okay with making a motion actually to approve the extension today, with the commitment that there be a meet and confer process with 444 around ultimate operation of the facility.
I
Marguerite,
would
so you're
second
making that
that.
motion? And John seconding that? Eric, I saw your hand go again. I don't know if you want to add another comment.
Yeah, I do.
You're willing to entertain that.
Am just checking, and I was notified of a pump station M rehabilitation on July 30th, 2020. I need to review that notification. I don't believe it. I don't recall that it discussed operation of the pump around of the bypass. I'm looking through it now; it's rather brief. But I do want to correct myself for the record. We were notified on July 20th of pump station M rehabilitation construction.
You said
That was
2020.
a
Did you mean
previous. That's a
2021? That's the previous
No,
one.
July 20th, 2020, we were notified.
Can I just clarify, Eric, because it is very complicated. I want to be clear that the contractor is not operating district equipment. The contractor is not going in and operating pump station M. The contractor would only be operating their own bypass equipment. Our equipment will be demo, so our operators will have nothing to operate at that time unless they were to operate the contractor's equipment. So I just want to clarify that. And that's all separate from what we're talking about today. Today's contract amendment.
This is starting to sound like meet and confer process, and I would like to suggest.
No, I think we're getting clarification for this vote. I'm feeling that way.
Okay. I'm feeling uncomfortable with how much detail is being gone into here. And I thought I should state that as a matter of course.
Okay.
Excuse me
And
for
duly
not
noted
being
for
with
both
me.
Eric and Eileen, that if there's things that could be taken to the meet and confer, let's go ahead and shuffle it off there. So we have a motion and a second on this. I wanted to follow up a little bit on John's comments with regard to the cost overruns. I mean, what I heard, John, was that there were things that obviously none of us like when cost overruns happen. At least of all, our staff were in the position of having to approve these or make these kind of amendments. But what I heard was that these were ones that, for the most part, were made because we didn't have blueprints from the developer because it was a substandard design in the first place, and B, new events that have shown that this is at a critical place and has critical consequences if it doesn't work correctly. And those don't seem to be things that we can retroactively say, oh well, you should have known this or should have known that. And I think I heard Clifford address the issue of what we're doing to make sure we're not bringing on substandard equipment going forward. Is that square with kind of your understanding of how this played out?
My question was, it would have been nice in the BD1 to talk about the 3 previous change orders and what they're related to.
And just have more details.
And because when I was reading this, I'm going, holy moly, this is a lot of money from 1 million to 1.8 total, and basically in change orders and the reasoning behind. And clearly we don't want a system sewer overflow and the consequences that go with it for public health and media as well. Nobody wants that. So we want to make sure that we're in the right. Now, I don't know at what point we found that the planning documents that we received from the private developer were inadequate. And that's having an impact now, from 2018 when the initial contract was lit. That, hopefully we'd have found that out sooner than later, and that would have been dealt with sooner than later. But as we often have cost overruns, and sometimes they're minor. And a lot of times they're for materials, and materials we all know are going up in cost over time, cement, steel, and things of that nature. But what I want to know is, anything over 25%, I think that's a fairly high number over the last 3 years, what they're related to and why, and how we're dealing with them, how we're going to try and address this going forward. Maybe in our due diligence, we need to be asking more questions, which maybe means in some cases it's a little bit slower process, perhaps, on our staff asking those questions so that we don't get burdened with those costs later.
All right, thank you, John. And I don't know if staff wants to respond, but I kind of feel this is mostly just directors giving you feedback on things.
Yeah, and again, if you'd like, Director Coleman, we can provide those costs. You might also recall, oh gosh, several months ago, we had some treatment plant change orders, and Jimmy had come to the board and explained how we're changing our process so that we try to capture the entire project early on. So we can share with the board and remind the board information that we've shared about what we're doing going forward, and also provide anything. I guess your threshold you're suggesting is 25%. That shouldn't be a problem.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Arisha, I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
Can I confirm the second? I got the first, Director Young,
John.
and who's second? Director
John Coleman.
Yeah,
Got
Director
it.
Coleman.
Okay. Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
Yes. All right, so that concludes our consent calendar. We're on to determination and discussion. And General Manager Chan, I'll let you introduce these items.
Thank you, President Lenny. So on August 6th, the district discovered a leak on Mokelumne Aqueduct number 2 in the Stockton area. The leak was caused by extensive localized corrosion of the aqueduct and was located directly under a Union Pacific Railroad bridge. Due to the condition of the pipe and the need for the aqueduct to support the district's operation, including supporting the Freeport operations, immediate repair of the aqueduct was necessary. An emergency declaration was made on August 18th, which was ratified by the board on August 24th. Staff quickly came together and worked collaboratively to come up with a repair plan. This included procuring needed materials, negotiating and executing a contract with Ranger Pipelines, expediting the Union Pacific Railroad construction permit, and implementing a program to monitor any movement of the railroad bridge. Construction began on September 13th. Staff and the contractor worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and completed the repair within 2 weeks, as scheduled on September 25th. Director of Engineering and Construction, Jimmy Olay, will make a brief presentation on the closeout of this emergency declaration.
Thank you, Clifford, and good afternoon, President Lenny and members of the board. This is a brief presentation to walk through the repair of the Mokelumne number 2. As you recall, this occurred in the city of Stockton, in an area where our easement abuts an auto dealer's area, and then on the other side, a residential area, and pipe was under a Union Pacific Railroad bridge. Here's a picture of the location. The picture on the left shows the railroad bridge. On the right is where Mokelumne Aqueduct number 1 goes through, and then the opening on the left is where Mokelumne number 2 goes through, and that's the location where the leak occurred. And the picture on the right shows what the leak looked like at the time that it was discovered. Just recapping the timeline, Clifford has already run through this, so I won't belabor it, other than to say that when the leak was discovered, our staff did implement a temporary repair to plug it so that, it lasted pretty well, but we discovered a second leak at the time that the board was ratifying the emergency declaration, so it clearly was an issue that we needed to address. The construction was completed on September the 25th as scheduled, and then with the following week, it was refilled and resumed operation just in time to start accepting Freeport water. So I'm going to go through just a series of pictures just to kind of give you an idea what was involved. So before the construction occurred, this was after the leak was discovered, we had asked staff from our Aqueduct section and from our Pipeline Infrastructure Division go out and assess the area and figure out exactly how we would repair this pipeline. And once we had all the contracts and agreements with Ranger Pipeline and Union Pacific in place, the contractors started the actual work. They basically had to, first task was to hand dig around the existing aqueduct to make sure we could confirm the extent of the corrosion that had occurred on the pipe. And the picture on the right shows basically the corrosion you can see right in the foreground there. The coating has been stripped off, and some of the steel has been stripped off. And as you look to the extremes, you can see the pipe coating and steel there is still intact. So this was a localized problem, which is what we thought it was as a result of our initial investigation, and this confirmed it at the start of the repair. So once the repair extent was confirmed, then the first task was to cut out the old pipe, and so these pictures show that the old pipe being pulled out, and the picture on the right shows kind of what it looks like after that pipe had been removed. And then we had two pipe pieces that were going to be installed to fit in there. These are sections of pipe that we already had for emergency situations at our Bixler yard. So those were identified, the lengths were identified, and that was on hand for installing into the repair area. Picture on the right shows it from inside the tunnel as it was being brought in. And one other thing to mention is that because this is under a railroad bridge, one of the things we had to do was to monitor for any movement of the bridge. Obviously, the railroad is concerned about movement and possibly damaging the bridge. And we had monitoring pads on the bridge that were surveyed every day to make sure that nothing was moving. This is a picture that shows the second piece of pipe being installed that finally closed off, made the closure for the repair. Picture on the right shows the final welding occurring on the two pieces. And then once all the welds were complete, there was a manhole on one of the pipe pieces that had then to be tightened, and then a slurry backfill was put over the pipe to make sure it was protected from any future things, and then the site was restored. This is just a picture of some of our staff, inspection staff, in the field, and our surveyors, basically monitoring and inspecting the work as it proceeded. And as Clifford mentioned, this went extremely well within 2 weeks, as we expected it to. Just a last slide on, actually one more slide after this, but on our repair costs. The bulk of this was what we had to pay the contractor for the repair work, but we had consultant with Johnny Elsner, who helped us develop our monitoring program. JIFCO, we had to buy some parts and materials for the pipe from them. And then we also had inspection services from one of our existing contracts to actually test the welds when they were done. Union Pacific had their own inspectors out there and flaggers to make sure that we stayed out of the way of the trains and we didn't impact their operations. And district labor to in terms of developing the plan and actually doing all the management and inspection of the work. So that totaled a little over $1 million, and I know in the BD1 it says about 1.6. So if you add some of the pumping costs that we had to incur while the aqueduct was out of service, that brings the total to about 1.6 million. So our next steps before you today is a consideration of declaring the emergency over. And we have 2 projects on the aqueducts that are coming up in the next 2 to 3 years that will continue to improve the reliability of those aqueducts. We have a relining on Mokelumne 1, and actually the Mokelumne 1, which is in the space next to where we just did the repair, will also need to have some recoating and backfill around it to make sure that pipe under the bridge is also protected for the long term. Mokelumne 2 will have relining work also coming up. And one of the things we will need to do is go back into this area where we just completed the repair to make sure that we complete the mortar coating on the interior at the joints. Because of the time constraints in this emergency repair, we did not do that as part of the repair process. So with that, I will turn it back over to Clifford for some acknowledgements of the team that actually implemented this repair.
Thank you, Jimmy. And before we turn it over to the board for discussion, I do want to acknowledge the team of district staff, our contractor, and the railroad partners for their outstanding work on this critical emergency leak repair. And what you see on this slide are the groups that worked on the project. And we have a few of us joining us today in the attendees to represent the many that were involved in the successful repair. I'll start with East Bay MUD staff. James Burke, Assistant Land Surveyor Supervisor. Danny DeCumas, Senior Engineering Designer. Ryan Johnson, Survey Technician 2. Scott Johnson, Plant Inspector. Ken Kelly, Power Treatment and Transmission Maintenance Specialist. Dan McAuliffe, Senior Construction Inspector. Marshall McLeod, Senior Civil Engineer. Ron Montefort, Supervising Plant Inspector. Rafi Monahan, Associate Civil Engineer. Javier Prospero, Senior Civil Engineer. And Eric West, Maintenance Specialist 3. With Ranger Pipelines, Peter Cudahy, Operations Manager. And with Union Pacific Railroad, Peggy Yagbuhe, I apologize, Western States Public Projects Manager.
That's great. And I mean, this is just phenomenal. It seems like literally yesterday that we had a presentation telling us about this problem and all the challenges that we were going to face in dealing with this. And so I just want to, on behalf of the board, express our appreciation for all the work and the effort that went into making this repair and in such a timely basis. Obviously, this is something that affects our drought operations. We started taking water from the Freeport project just a little while ago. This is critical to being able to deliver that water in a timely basis. So again, thank you for that. I can't help but also think the fact that who says that big bureaucracies can't move quickly and swiftly to get things done. And I'm really proud. Couldn't say how proud I am of everyone who made this happen and all the efforts of our district staff and the skills that came together in coordinating efforts, obviously with our district staff, as well as the contractors that we depend on to get complex jobs like this done on a timely basis. So thank you.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes.
I join you
ahead,
in
Bill.
your remarks, and I would like to make a motion to accept the recommendation declaring the end of the emergency and commend staff for their role and the contractors for their ability to join with a swift-moving team. And these are the things that keep us in the forefront and outstanding in how we deal with our situations. That is my motion.
All right, thank you, Bill. Take that motion. Frank, I see your hand.
I let somebody else second it, but I wanted to ask one quick question. This was Ranger Pipelines that did the work, wasn't it?
That is correct.
We've used them on several other emergency and urgent cases in the past, and they actually did the Southern Loop Pipeline.
Yeah.
And in the Southern Loop Pipeline, they actually got it done not only on time, but under budget.
Right.
So these guys are amazing as contractors for pipe.
With that, I'll second Bill's motion.
Great. Any other discussion, comments? All right, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote on this then.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Absolutely, yes. Good.
President Lenny.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great, we get a unanimous motion on ending the emergency.
Big thanks to Ranger Pipelines.
Great job.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the staff that worked on this as well. And thank you, board, for helping us through this emergency. Next, we have Janella Sambor-Wallace, our Diversity and Inclusion Officer, and Jaisha White, the Senior Human Resources Analyst, to provide an update on our racial equity and justice efforts, the development of our DEI strategic plan, as well as our semi-annual values update.
Good afternoon, directors. I'm Janella Sambor-Wallace, Diversity and Inclusion Officer in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Culture, or ODEC. Today, I will be presenting to you an update on the REG project and our DEI strategic plan, along with Jaisha White, Senior HR Analyst in ODEC. Next slide, please. In addition to the REG and DEI updates, we will also provide you our schedule and next steps. Next slide, please. So we'll be going through specific REG strategies in the next few slides. The Black Employee Network, or BEN, has consistently been holding listening sessions for group members to share experiences personally and professionally and build a network of support. Congratulations to the newly elected BEN officers and board. Their first meeting was last week, where they discussed professional development planning for the group. Next slide, please. Strategy 2 is to take supplemental data from Winters that we collected from our internal focus groups, made up of employees that were underrepresented in the cultural audit. The final data from these focus groups will be integrated into the Winters cultural audit. Next slide. RAGE Strategy 4 is a review of our current policies and procedures to identify and address any systemic bias. Winters completed a review of our civil service rules to identify any issues or barriers that may negatively impact the district's hiring or promotion processes. The results of that review were some modifications to HR practices, but not any modifications to the actual civil service rules. Key recommendations were outlined in the board memo. We are also currently working on a process in which we are integrating an equity lens to the ongoing policies and procedural review process in partnership with internal audit. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Jaisha on the next slide.
Thank you so much, and greetings, everyone. So I will touch on the building blocks of our DEI strategic plan. So first, we'll be leveraging the recommendations and DEI solutions that came from the Winters Cultural Audit Report. We're also going to look at, they also completed an analysis of the civil service rules. So we're looking at that and looking for opportunities for lessons learned and how we can integrate that into the development of our DEI strategic plan. And we also have the project teams that are working tirelessly to move forward with developing their strategic goals that will really inform the framework of our DEI strategic plan. So now I'm going to touch on some of our existing DEI efforts that are currently in progress. We have our racial equity and justice projects. Some of those have entailed hosting a series of listening sessions, developing our engagement survey, developing a racism response team, and establishing protocols for how we'll support employees when they may experience racism by customers and the general public. We're also expanding and bolstering our diversity committee and affinity groups. Specifically, we are currently working with employees on the formation of the Disability Advocacy and Rights Team, also known as DART. One of the goals of DART is to raise awareness of workplace and societal issues that impact people with disabilities. Our DEO office, which consists of Janella's team, is currently reviewing potential EEO aftercare options as a restorative practice for employees that go through the EEO process. Another opportunity that we're looking at is enhancing our current workforce development and internship programs. Now, moving forward to some of the new DEI initiatives that are on the horizon, we are including recommendations from the Women in Trades report. And as part of that, one of the solutions and recommendations was to develop a Women in Trades task force. So that's something that is currently on our radar. We're also incorporating the Gender Expression and Identity Initiative that was developed by our Reigning and Pride affinity group. We're also developing a series of DEI training that is specific to all levels of the organization to help expand awareness of the foundations of DEI. It'll also include topics germane to understanding the macro impacts of microaggressions and building value-driven teams. We'll also look at DEI benchmarking and a combination of metrics that will be tracking data through an ongoing employee feedback process. Next slide, please. Thank you. In striving for DEI excellence, we must build on our core values to ensure DEI is amplified in everything that we do. So one of the things that we're starting to do is hold presentations to introduce and build awareness of the newly established Office of Diversity, Equity, and Culture. And because language is a powerful and essential tool for building inclusion, we're also working on developing an inclusive language guide. And as far as our training program, we're looking at ensuring that we're embedding cultural competence into our emotional intelligence program. Next slide. Is that the next slide?
Jaisha, it looks like the slide deck may be out of order. So which slide are you looking for?
There was a slide number 8, I believe.
On what?
Slide 8.
I believe it was the next steps, Jaisha.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, remember we went from values to next steps.
Yeah, they're out of order.
So what are our next steps? We will continue to implement recommendations for all phase 1 and 2 strategies. We will develop work plans for phase 3 strategies. We will continue the work of our racial equity projects. We're also working on finalizing our DEI strategic plan, which we will look to bring that draft to the board next month. We are also hosting an inclusive leadership forum, which will seek to shape, deepen the skills required to lead a diverse and culturally competent workforce. Again, we're also looking at the development of the inclusive language guide so that people understand what dictates inclusive language and also what exclusive language looks like. And we want to also acknowledge that this is a lot of work and we'll be taking a phased approach to the development of the strategic plan. So as a result, we're going to focus on the internal aspects of this work, which is specifically looking at our hiring and recruitment, promotion and retention, and procurement and contracting. The next phase will be more externally focused, which will center on community engagement, capital improvements, and other work that has a more public-facing focus. We also want to take this time to acknowledge and thank each and every employee that has participated in the development of our equity strategies. Your contributions, your input has not gone unnoticed. It's been instrumental in moving this work forward, and we can't thank you enough. Next slide. So this concludes our presentation. So we want to open up to if there's any questions for us today.
Any more questions?
Doug?
Yeah, Lisa.
Hi, just a quickie. So it's interesting that Winter's recommendation are to adjust our human resource practices rather than modifications to our civil service rules. Can you sort of talk a bit more about that? It's an interesting approach.
So when we're having conversations, the civil service rules inform a lot of our policies and procedures and practices as it relates to hiring, recruitment, and the way we promote and our employees. So we wanted to make sure that we apply, using those that equity framework to look at the rules that guide that process to ensure that are there any gaps that we need to be addressing, and looking at it, how can we close and make some improvements in that area. So because that does inform and influence our HR policies and our hiring and recruitment efforts.
I guess my only question really is, so what if we have someone other than Laura at the helm, for instance, in human resources? Will those practices, quote unquote practices, are they going to be rules? Are they going to be regulations? Or what exactly? I mean, what prevents some other human resources manager from diverting from these new rules and these new practices?
So we do have HR policies and procedures, and I believe some of their recommendations will likely be encompassed in some of these policies and procedures. So as part of our review, we'll also be looking into policies and procedures as well, and seeing how we can implement this equity lens and also some of these Winters recommendations. And of course, as you know, once it comes into policy and becomes a procedure, we will try to ensure that the district follows what these procedures and policies are.
That's comforting to know that they will become policies and procedures as opposed to practices. So thank you. Great report. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Marguerite?
Oh, and I appreciate your focus and your really drive to get this done. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to echo Lisa's comments, both sets of comments, both about appreciating the report and the progress that's being made, and also the importance of sort of institutionalizing the practices that are being sort of recommended, so they live beyond any one set of people, one set of managers. And then hang on, let me turn this off. It's always spam. Is my question is, what part of this, of what your sort of the current work plan really feels like it presents you both with the most challenges, and how can we or others support you in overcoming or addressing those challenges?
Director Young, thank you so much for asking us. I'm new to the district, but there was so much work done before I got here, and we're definitely asking a lot of the employees with this equity strategy, and we just wanted to acknowledge that, as Jaisha said in her presentation, there is a lot that is expected to be put onto employees. So, we appreciate you asking. We haven't gotten to the questions of resources or anything yet, but that is something that is overhanging, and definitely something that we hope to discuss. Jaisha, any thoughts?
No, I echo exactly what you said about the resources being a challenge that we need to definitely keep at the forefront of our radar. I would also say one of the challenges, again, I'm a new employee as well, is just the education piece, building more awareness around the work that we're doing, creating more clear communication channels so that people can have a clear, more transparent and understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think that we need to kind of close those gaps for people.
Anyone else? Other comments? Bill, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I was inspired reading the latest report, and you had me going back in my library to bring forward some of the books and documentations, and I think about Zachary Wong, who was with us in 2009 and 10. And he wrote his book, Human Factors in Project Management. That's one of the books that I dug out of my library. And the other that went hand in glove with it that EBMUD was doing back then was hate crimes. That's a blueprint for action. These are things that some of you on the board may remember that we put forth back in 2009. And I'm so happy to see this project moving as it is to put people in D&I department operations at a better perspective to take us forward as a team working on our diversity and inclusion for the betterment of all of the staff and assistance to the people we serve. I just wanted to make that comment.
Nice job, guys.
Andy,
Thank you
you
so
raising your
much.
hand?
Yes, so I wanted to comment, we heard a fair amount of detail, particularly on strategy 4, which has more to do with recruitment and retention of diverse applicants. And it does look like the team is getting into some more detail. I'm really excited to see the results of that conversation, starting to identify these opportunities for improvement. And I wanted to recall what the district has done in the past in the restructuring of our what was called some time ago the Special Employment Program. We had sought out opportunities that were very focused and very targeted. And one of those projects was a coordination with the Peralta Community Colleges on the Plumber 1 recruitment. And that's, as an example, there may be ways to revisit that opportunity or to look at a similar model with other opportunities. But I do feel like the community colleges are a important partner in this strategy, and I would encourage continued exploration related to that. It seems like they see us as a partner. Of course, we should include Contra Costa College as well as the Peralta colleges, and would like to encourage exploring that avenue as a partner for continued work in that strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Director Katz, on that. And you may also recall that we do currently partner with the community colleges, both on the trades, some of the trades programs, on educating our own employees, as well as we've actually taught classes at Solano Community College to train operators as well. So that partnership is strong, and we want to continue to build on that partnership.
All right. Any other comments? Thank you so much for the report and the update. Keep up the good work.
Thank you all for your
much.
support. Thank you, bye.
And both of you, welcome to the district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janella, and thank you, Jaisha. So next is the coronavirus update. I just want to remind the board, not that you need the reminding, but there continues to be a lot of activity on our COVID response. Last week, we did host Dr. George Rutherford. He's the head of infectious disease and global epidemiology at UCSF, to answer our employees' questions about the COVID vaccine. Just to share with you, that webinar was attended by just over 300 employees. Today, we'll share information about our infection rates of the district, comparing vaccinated and unvaccinated employees, and also, as requested by the board, the cost of our COVID response since March 2020. And we'll also update you on our activities related to employee vaccinations. And we have Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, to provide the update.
Good afternoon, President Linney and members of the board. So slide 2 is showing our positive case rate for Alameda County and Contra Costa County. And for the past couple of months or so, it's been trending downward. Our own district data has been trending downward in terms of the number of positive cases in the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's been trending downward slowly. So everything's heading the right direction. Looking at the county's data, we're not quite there yet, but it's conceivable in a couple weeks we could be down at those very low infection levels that we saw towards the end of June last summer. But we're very mindful of what happened last winter, which is shown right there in the middle of the page. So as we head into winter, we are a bit leery of what could happen, but we'll see what happens. So at this point, we are at 146 employee positives. We had a couple over the weekend and 22 contractor positives confirmed to date. And if we look at the district's cases over the past month and calculate how many people are positives, and we look at the unvaccinated population versus the vaccinated population, we can calculate that it's roughly 2.5 times more likely for a district person to contract the virus if they're unvaccinated. And this rate is consistent with Alameda County, which is shown right below there. Lower than Contra Costa County. I'm not sure why. The statewide rate is probably closer to 7 or 8. But here in Alameda County, it's roughly 2.5 times more likely that a unvaccinated person will contract the coronavirus. Now, it's true that our positive rates over the summer were comparable between these two populations, between vaccinated and unvaccinated staff. And actually, as we've moved into the fall, we're getting more positives in the vaccinated population, but that is far more of a stronger function of the fact that 80% of our employees are vaccinated at this point, and the unvaccinated population is shrinking quickly. But overall, certainly more vulnerable for the unvaccinated, and our own data shows that. So as we continue to move through the fall and our vaccinated population continues to grow, overall, I think we will see, certainly over the next few weeks and hopefully forever, we'll continue to see an overall positive rate drop. But within that, we will probably see proportionally more positive cases in the vaccinated population simply because it's going to be so large at the district. About 20 people are quarantining right now or in isolation. So this number is dropping slowly, but it's still relatively large. So on the vaccination rates, we're at 80% now, fully vaccinated at the district. About a month ago, the first meeting in September, that was 72%. We're certainly comparable to Alameda and Contra Costa County. And I would just also mention that the definition of fully vaccinated will probably get more complicated shortly. We have booster shots coming into view that might be approved by the FDA that may be dependent on which vaccine you're talking about. So there may be different requirements depending on what vaccine is already in your arm. And we also have, thankfully, the 5 and 11-year-olds possibly being approved by the FDA around Halloween is the estimate. That will introduce about 10% more population in Alameda, Contra Costa County, statewide. About 10% of the population will suddenly be eligible for a vaccine. So some of these numbers are going to bounce around a bit once that age group gets approved. So this will get a little more complicated, but we'll try to present this information as coherently as we can in future meetings. With respect, so on slide 5, with respect to isolation and quarantine protocols, these continue to be complicated, but luckily haven't changed too much in the last few months. So just to recap briefly for the board, if somebody is symptomatic with COVID-like symptoms or has a positive test, you must isolate for 10 days based on the onset of those symptoms plus another 24 hours when you're symptom-free. This has been the protocol for a long time. If you're asymptomatic but test positive, it's more or less the same. So in other words, if you have COVID, you need to stay away for 10 days. This is true whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, and these rules, again, haven't changed even as we get a large percentage of the population vaccinated. Now, there is a provision where we can shorten the return to work if you have been positive for essential workers. This is in the health code. We have not needed to use this at EBMUD because we have not had a shortage of operators or been put into this difficult situation, but it does exist. And there is a quicker pathway back under narrow circumstances. Otherwise, really, it's about being on the sidelines for 10 days. And I know this was mentioned during the last board meeting about the protocol for professional sports. And I think collegiate sports probably also fall in this category, and probably a couple of other industries. But there is a protocol where 2 negative tests in rapid succession following a positive test may get you back on the field or the basketball court or whatever quicker than standard health code, but that does not apply in general. It is not applied to us. Moving to cost, shown here, and the first group of expenses, those 3 at the top, these are all COVID-related costs going back to March 2020 to through September, 19 or 20 months worth. The top 3 there are largely labor-related costs, and that first group, COVID administration and EOT, encompasses many, many things. It encompasses our training, our legal hours that we've spent reviewing health code, meet and confer, our own contact tracing that we do with our own staff in-house. I'll get to the professional services in a moment. Countless, I don't know how many, hundreds of trainings that we've conducted with employees, new protocols. So many, many hours are baked into that top number, which is why it's so large. The second row, employee vaccination, 333,000 roughly. That is the time that employees bill on their time card when they go get the vaccine. And then finally, over 12 million in the field rotation. So this was back in the spring and early summer of 2020 when we sent hundreds of employees home during the early phase of the pandemic. And they remained at home for 4 to 6 weeks in isolation as a way of protecting our workers. Now, these first 3 are, as I mentioned, largely labor expenses. So they're costs that we would have incurred otherwise. They're not necessarily out of pocket, and it really is a measure of lost productivity more than anything else. We have sought reimbursement for these costs with FEMA and Cal OES and have so far not been eligible. The second 3 in the middle there of costs on this table, employee testing represents our program, both the program we ran last winter, which was about 400 employees who work and continue to work in close contact with each other. So we ran a testing program last winter, and then we initiated the second testing program, as the board is aware, on September 13th. We're in our 5th week of that employee testing now, and that's for the unvaccinated workers. That's those costs shown there. So this is kits and lab processing time that add up to those costs. Work area modifications, so this is supporting telecommuting, plexiglass, extensions in people's workspace, helping people socially distance, modifying buildings. That's in that next category. And then the contact tracing, this is outside services. So this is a professional services contract associated with helping us support our caseload. So this middle category group of costs are true added expenses, and we are seeking reimbursement for these costs as well, but those applications are still pending. The last line item there is COVID-related leave through the Federal Family Leave Act, SB 95, and extended FMLA. These were all unfunded mandates by the state or federal government, and our employee leave is tracked and shown there is 6.3 million. And again, that is not that's essentially labor costs that we would otherwise have paid that translate into lower productivity. Any questions before I keep going?
When you mentioned that we were not eligible for FEMA reimbursement for specified expenses, was that because of the type of entity that we are? In that parts of the law might have referred facially to cities and counties, and we're a special district and there isn't a comparable regulation, or was that because of the type of work that we were requesting reimbursement for?
So the large, Director Katz, a large chunk of that is just because we were not included in those entities that could be reimbursed. That second group that Dave is talking about, those are areas where we may be eligible and that we're seeking but a large chunk of that we just were not eligible for.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's some of these laws were written quite quickly, and we might not have had time to intervene in the legislative process. But the money remains much of the money remains unspent. There is unspent money that exists, and perhaps our industry associations may be able to petition FEMA for a regulation that expands the definition of municipal services or whatever applicable definitions there are. It's worth a try through industry associations to explore that.
Okay, thank you, Director Katz.
I agree with you, Andy. Yes, indeed.
Okay, moving on. Slide 7, review of our policy. This has not changed recently, but just to recap, we've been testing since September 13th. This is on district time, district cost. Any unvaccinated employee reporting to a work site is part of the program. We've had high levels of compliance, only a handful of issues, so this is going well. Vaccinations are required by November 1st. And we're still processing medical and religious exemptions and getting back to employees as quickly as we can. And those employees with approved exemptions will continue to test beyond November 1st on district time and district cost. Leave beginning October 1st and beyond, district paid leave is limited to those employees who are vaccinated or exempted and quarantined due to a close contact at the district, and employees who need time feeling ill after getting vaccinated. So a much narrower set of leave eligibility as of about a week and a half ago.
And Dave, you
Yes.
have numbers on who's falling, how many people were having fall into those two different categories, employees who are not vaccinated and who are having to quarantine or take leave?
Yeah, so off the top of my head, Director Young, only a handful of people after, so it's been, 10 days since October 1. I think maybe half dozen or so are probably in this category of needing to quarantine due to a close contact that may be symptomatic. We did have an individual, in fact, the latest one was a close contact at work, and the employee was vaccinated and is positive. So that would be one. So there's about a half dozen probably in that first category. And then the second one, I would put that at roughly a dozen people or so are requesting leave after feeling ill after getting vaccination. And this is another leading indicator that we have that tells us that we certainly have employees continuing to get vaccinated every day. And so we know that number for our vaccinated staff will continue to climb here in the next few weeks.
And do we have anybody that is not vaccinated who's quarantining at their own, using their own time off, et cetera?
Yes, we do. Okay, so things we are active with, as the board is aware, we have written our policy down, and it has an accompanying FAQ document that's available for employees. That our vaccination policy is subject to change depending on things around us, such as changes in law, regulations, state directives, and status of emergency declarations. We have been conducting our program now. We're in our 5th week for testing unvaccinated employees. The exemption process is very active right now. And as Clifford mentioned, we had a very informative webinar from Dr. George Rutherford last week. I thought he did a great job being personable and being very relatable with his responses, and also answering questions that were very, very relevant to district employees. I thought it was very, very helpful personally. We have ongoing meet and confer, and with respect to our safety requirements and our contractors, for new contracts, this will be a requirement for any new contract with the district that they comply with all of our safety protocols and vaccination requirements. For existing contractors, that's a matter of negotiating a change order, and we're working through that by getting cost proposals back from various contractors and looking at what types of constraints they could be dealing with. At the same time, making sure that we keep our employees safe. So we may have to be flexible there, but that's an ongoing negotiation. And that's what I have for you today.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions for Dave? Okay, so next is our drought update. Last
Bill,
Monday.
you have a
Oh,
question?
Director Patterson?
It's not a question, but I'd just like to chime in and say, last week, I had my third COVID vaccination. I'm all the way in. I missed Dr. Rutherford in that process, but I'm fully vaccinated to the extent possible. And I just wanted to make sure, board members are keeping up with all these things that staff's required to do. And for those staff who are looking and watching, you have to follow your star, but it's better to be vaccinated and be with us and your families than it is not to be.
Are you saying, Bill, that you're living up to the old adage, do as I say because I do as I say?
All right.
I think so. I have my booster Thursday.
Yep.
See, I do have a question.
Congratulations.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
I do have a question. Hello, Dave.
Yep, go ahead, Director Mellon.
Go ahead, Trey.
So I've gotten my Moderna shots, but I haven't heard when the booster, and I'm over 6 months now. Do you have a place to tell us where to go?
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. A place where to go for a shot.
So if I have this correct, Director Mellon, so Pfizer was the first one to issue some instructions, or I guess through the FDA. The FDA issued instructions for the Pfizer vaccine and what the recommendations were for those populations that should get a booster. I believe Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are pending direction from the FDA, and it should happen in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Moderna has shown a little bit more staying power than the Pfizer vaccine, is my understanding. So they may or may not be the same recommendations depending on what demographic group you may fall in. So I think in about 2 weeks, the FDA right now is juggling 3 things. They're juggling the booster recommendation for Johnson & Johnson, the booster recommendation for Moderna, and the emergency approval for the 5 to 11-year-olds for Pfizer. Those are all pending with the FDA right now, and so they're under pressure to approve all of those in some way, shape, or form in the next 2 weeks.
Are you keeping good information about that for employees that inquire as well?
I off the top of my head, we haven't. I mean, this has been so fluid, but we could certainly add that to our updates because I'm certain that many employees would find that useful.
And this was also, Director Mellon, one of the questions that was asked to Dr. Rutherford. So, he also made his best estimate, which is in lines with what Dave just shared with you.
Okey-dokey. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Dave. So now is our drought update. And just as a reminder, last Monday, we did begin our Freeport operations to supplement our Mokelumne and local water supplies. So today, we'll update you on those operations, plans if the dry weather continues into next year, our assistance with Marin Municipal Water District, and our customer and public outreach efforts. Also, as requested by the board at the last meeting, we did put together a few slides on our long-term water supply planning efforts, including information about our approach to recycled water and desalination. And if the board's okay with those slides, we can use these slides for future public meetings, since this is a question that we're often asked about. So we have 3 presenters for this. We have Dave Briggs, Linda Hu, and Andrea Polk. I'll provide the update, and we'll start with Dave Briggs.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. Hello again. And shown here on the right on slide 2 is the Folsom South Canal receiving its first allotment of water for the present drought. So our staff shot this photo last Monday on October 4th when the water started to flow. So very nice to see this photograph. This is so we're moving our CVP water right now, part of our 33,250 allocation for this contract year. And as of October 8th, we'd moved 1,000 acre feet. And then as of midnight last night, 1,800 acre feet. So it's, we're getting everything here slowly and surely. And second slide here, along with the CVP water associated with our base allocation, we're going to divert an additional 2,000 acre feet of CVP water, which we acquired through Contra Costa Water District's CVP allocation. And in addition to that, begin moving 3,200 acre feet of CCWD zoned water pursuant to the settlement. So all of that is going to be very active. We are going to get this pumping done as fast as we can. We want to make sure that we have all the capacity possible for us next year in case the drought continues. So we will keep it going full bore until we get all the water here. And with that, I will transition to Linda.
Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, President Linney and members of the board. As Clifford mentioned at the last meeting, the board had asked for an update and speaking points regarding the district's long-term water supply strategy, including in particular speaking points for recycled water and our message around desalination. So in response, I have a number of slides lined up to address this topic, which should help provide information and messages that can be used to respond to future public inquiries on the district's efforts to date and what we have planned ahead. So here you see our long-term water supply strategy is focused on continuing to build a diverse, resilient, and sustainable water supply portfolio. First, we need to plan for uncertainty, including climate change and droughts. We need to protect our current entitlements, our water rights. We need to continue sustainable groundwater management and stewardship, such as through development of the East Bay Plain Groundwater Sustainability Plan and also the DREAM project in San Joaquin County. Maintain our current conservation levels and expand. Also further expand our recycled water program by expanding existing projects and also developing new partnerships. And last but not least, continue to develop regional partnerships and water transfer agreements to diversify supplies and improve regional reliability. An example is the recent formation of the Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Joint Powers Authority, of which EBMUD joined as a member. Next slide, please. So in terms of our investment on developing long-term water supply to date, we have invested nearly $900 million over the last 50 years to diversify our water supplies, which includes supplemental supplies, conservation, and recycled water. And one of the key investments was our Freeport Regional Water Project, which allows EBMUD to bring in water from the Sacramento River in drought years. We can potentially bring in up to 100 million gallons a day from the Sacramento River in drought years, depending on the allocation of CVP water from the Bureau of Reclamation. And through Freeport, we can also bring in transfer water from other sellers. And these supplemental supplies really do lessen the need for mandatory drought restrictions and rationing. Investments in Freeport, as well as conservation, recycling, and other efforts have helped to prevent critically low water levels in our system, even in droughts like the one that we're facing currently. Next slide, please. And our long-term water supply strategy is captured in our Urban Water Management Plan, which was recently completed, and that plan will be updated every 5 years. It's a comprehensive document that supports the district's long-term water resources planning. And based on the range of scenarios for a planning horizon to the year 2050, the plan outlines the district's strategies to ensure adequate water supplies to meet our customer needs through the year 2050. This plan also includes our water shortage contingency plan, which provides policy guidance to minimize the impacts of water shortage on district customers, especially during droughts, while continuing to meet our contractual, our environmental, and our water rights obligations on the Mokelumne River. And the plan really does focus on diversifying our water portfolio beyond just our main Mokelumne sources, so that we're more resilient to change and unpredictable circumstances. Next slide, please. So we're on slide 7. Now let's get into the portfolio components of our water supply plan. As you know, our Mokelumne water supply is gravity fed and fairly low cost to supply to our customers. And this has really helped to keep our customers' water rates at just about a penny a gallon. When considering new additions to our portfolio, we keep our ratepayers in mind and cost effectiveness. But it's also important to consider other factors such as environmental impact and reliability. In addition to our Mokelumne supply, our CDP drought supply and water transfers, some of the top priorities in our diverse water supply portfolio includes conservation and leak detection, recycled water, regional partnerships, and groundwater. Water conservation by our customers offset the need to bring in new supply sources, which can help to delay or sometimes eliminate the need to build costly new infrastructure. And we will continue to look at and implement innovation, customer partnerships, and information services efforts for saving water. Leak detection is how East Bay MUD does its part to conserve water. We use acoustic loggers, satellite detection, and other methods to try to prevent or catch leaks early on in the system. Regarding recycled water, East Bay MUD currently uses non-potable recycled water to offset potable water demands. And I'll go over more on recycled water on the next slide. Regional partnerships are important. The district continues to explore and build regional partnerships to increase reliability. As you're aware, we're a partner in the Bay Area Regional Reliability, or BAR, with a number of other water agencies in the Bay Area. And one of the BAR projects identified is the expansion of CCWD's Los Vaqueros Reservoir. And by working with multi-agency partners, this project could provide us with 30,000 up to 30,000 acre feet of added local storage. And as the board is aware, we just recently joined the LVE-JPA. And as for groundwater, East Bay MUD is a groundwater sustainability agency for our local groundwater basin here in the East Bay. And we are currently gathering data to make science-based decisions about groundwater use in the East Bay in the future. We've just released the draft groundwater sustainability plan for public review, and we will be bringing that plan to the board for consideration later this year in December. Also, East Bay MUD is pursuing a pilot program, the DREAM project in San Joaquin County, to explore sharing of groundwater storage benefits. Next slide, please. Recycled water, it's an important piece of our portfolio. We have developed, here you can see listed, we have developed 5 recycled water projects, which we currently operate. The North Richmond and the Rare projects, which supply recycled water to a refinery. San Ramon and East Bayshore, which are our landscape irrigation projects. And we also run a commercial truck program. We can treat up to 9 million gallons per day of recycled water to offset irrigation and industrial use that previously used drinking water. And just to put it in perspective, that saves enough water to supply the indoor needs of about 180,000 East Bay residents. To date, we have invested about $280 million to develop our recycled water program. You can see the table listing our projects on the top right corner. While the table on the slide shows our existing recycled water projects broken down by each of the 5 projects, but based on their capability. The actual delivery each year will vary due to weather, supply availability, operations, and actual needs. And overall, our goal is to recycle 20 MGD by the year 2040, and that will be more than doubling what we currently recycle. And to do so, we will develop new projects, including partnering with cities and a refinery in Rodeo on a new industrial reuse project, and also developing satellite plants where large irrigators could take and treat and reuse wastewater locally on site. We'll also continue to expand our existing projects. And I also want to touch upon residential fill stations. We've recently received some inquiries about residential recycled water fill stations. Our main goal with recycled water right now isn't bringing it to every front and every backyard of every home. Instead, you can see that we're removing the largest users from our drinking water system and converting them to recycled water instead, which saves more drinking water for the benefit of all of our customers. And recycled water use sites, they do require, they have some requirements to comply with on-site standards and reporting to avoid cross connections to the drinking water system. Therefore, making it really a better option for larger institutions than for the individual residential use at this time. However, I just want to say that we continue to evaluate the possibility of operating a residential fill station program in future drought years, including a station in West Oakland, which we've piloted last year. And in the meantime, we do offer many other programs to help customers save water on home landscaping, such as our lawn conversion rebates. One last note I want to mention about EBMUD's Recycle Water program. As the board is aware, we currently do not treat recycled water with advanced purification for drinking purposes. Although that technology, it does exist for indirect potable reuse, and it is being used in parts of California where it is more cost effective as compared to other water supply options, such as in Southern California. And for EBMUD, we will continue to monitor development of potable reuse projects in California and study the possibility for the future. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. And one potential future water supply alternative that EBMUD continues to monitor is desalination. In 2003, we partnered with other water agencies in the Bay Area to study the feasibility of a regional desalination facility. It was determined that the most efficient possible desalination plant would treat brackish water at the mouth of the San Joaquin Delta instead of seawater, such as in the San Francisco Bay. Brackish water has less salt than seawater, so it takes a less intensive process to treat. But even with brackish water, the study found that a desalination plant would have high energy consumption, high operating costs, and challenges with disposing of high salt brine, which is a byproduct of the process. And EBMUD will continue to evaluate desalination options, but we are currently prioritizing other supply solutions that I've discussed earlier, which have lower costs, lower carbon footprint, and don't produce a significant waste byproduct.
Linda?
The 2003 regional desalination study actually led to the establishment of the Bay Area Regional Reliability Group, or the BAR group, where water agencies decided to consider other regional options before advancing desalination. And I just want to mention that for the slides that I just went over, if it would be helpful to have the speaking notes, we can certainly provide a copy of these slides with the speaking notes to the board.
Linda, Director Mellon has a question. Oh, Director Young has a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, who's going first?
Director Young?
I can't. Okay. So I have two questions. One goes back to the recycling, residential recycled water pickup. During the last drought, we did, I thought, as a board, actually commit to deploying some residential pickup stations. And so what I'm hearing, or let me test what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that we're not really thinking about doing that any longer. And I think at least it seems very likely that we're headed into a more severe situation, and that we do have, a couple of pilot projects that we were, considering to support that on this side of the hills, where there are options on, more convenient options on the other side of the hills for folks that live near, can go out to the CCWD or the Central San site, or to our own at the San Ramon DSRD facility. So am I not hearing that correct?
Yeah, maybe if I can clarify, you're absolutely right. On the other side of the hills, there are it's outside of our wastewater service area, but Central San, they do run a facility where our customers can go and pick up water. DSRC, Pleasanton, and Livermore are also exploring possibly open up a fill station, not this year, but the next year, if the drought continues, in the Pleasanton area. And the reason why Central San had their station open all this time is because it's part of their household hazardous waste drop-off, where people can drop off hazardous waste and then also conveniently pick up recycled water. Now, maybe I should clarify, for us, we ran a pilot successfully last year to have we ran a pilot on a residential fill station, which is just outside of SD1. So we are prepared to open that in the future. It's currently not open, but we are getting it prepared and ready to open. should the drought continue and the board decide to want us to open up that fill station.
Okay. And then my other question is actually a comment or a suggestion, is that when we talk to customers about the relative expense of and other kind of pro cons of desal or recycled water, it would be helpful to have a graphic comparison that helps people understand why, our the water we have is cheap. The easiest way to make more water is to conserve it. That's the cheapest way to, so that it shows graphically on one slide instead of 9 rather complicated slides, the picture. It's like, yeah, it's part of our long-term plan, but here's how much it costs. Here's, the other, concerns that come with it, right? Versus our own kind of rather privileged main water supply, which makes it hard for anything else to compete, right? Really. So it would be helpful to have something like that. These are great slides, but it would be really helpful. That's like a take-home slide. It's like, bottom line, this is the least expensive, most environmentally beneficial way to get more water. And then, sort of lay it out. But thank you for the presentation. It is helpful to put it all in context.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that comment. We can look into a graphic.
John, I see your hand.
Great. Thank you very much, Linda. Good presentation. I appreciate it. I was wondering, one on the photo of when it showed a Hardy Reservoir with 2021 today and 1976, if those are same time frames. We don't have to go back to the photo, but were they taken the same month in the 76 and 2021? So we're talking apples to apples and oranges to oranges when that's being shown. One could be taken.
You're referring to slide 5, where we kind of show that side-by-side photo comparison and whether it's the same time frame during that year for both. Okay.
Because if one's taken in October, November, and the other's taken in January, that's not a relative photo. So we need to make sure that we're talking from apples and apples and oranges to oranges. In terms of recycled water, I hope if we're needing to go down that direction next year, that East Bay Mud customers can also go to DSRSD's facility if they open it up. I know we can go to Central Sand because all East Bay Mud customers on the eastern side of the hills are Central Sand customers. Therefore, they have a right to be able to go there and get that water. But I don't know if you're a San Ramon Valley customer, if you could go down to DSRSD and get the water, because you're not a DSRSD customer and it's a long haul to go from, let's say, San Ramon to Martinez. So we need to find if they would be allowed to take it, and if not, enter into discussions with DSRSD to have that happen.
Director Coleman, I just want to say that's a really good question, really good point. We are actually in discussions with DSRC right now, and they seem very open to having East Bay Mud customers
Fantastic.
Pick it up from them because of the Durwell partnership.
Thank you. Great. I'm glad to hear that. The other thing on desal, again, I hear that and others hear that all the time. I think one thing that has changed on the energy side, and energy is expensive, we want to have the least amount of footprint, is when the 10 plus years ago when this was looked at, in Australia and in the Middle East, they're using wind, solar, and tidal power to operate their desal facilities. So it's essentially they're energy net neutral. And that's something, if we were to move in that direction, I would hope, one, that we would do, because where the San Joaquin and the Delta converge, you have a lot of wind, a lot of tide, and a lot of sun. And that could be one component to helping lessen the cost of desalinization on the energy side. And that needs to be, I would think, a prerequisite as part of going forward for desalinization.
Thank you for that comment.
All right, I see Lisa's hand.
Yes, Linda, thank you for that update. So I'm thinking in regards to presentations, and one on the slide, we talk about running Freeport, but the cost to run Freeport is substantial. And I would like it personally if there was a slide or incorporate into the slide about Freeport the cost of running it, the costs associated with running Freeport. Number two, for my presentations to my ward, I would also like to have incorporated the challenges to recycled water in West Contra Costa County, you know, the source water, because I'm always asked about that issue. Three, yes to speaking notes, thank you. And finally, let me piggyback on John. With regards to desal, you know, has there been a study since 2003? Have circumstances changed? What are other people looking at? Because those are also questions that I get repeatedly. So thank you for the great presentation, and probably all of the directors don't need those specifics incorporated into their presentations, but I would for my ward. So thank you.
Thank you, and we can work on that.
I'll have a presentation coming up in November, and I've been getting lots of questions about desal, and this has been very helpful in terms of providing foundations. So give me all the notes you can.
Desal always seems to come up.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
Linda, would you like to go to your next slide then?
Yes, please. Next slide. All right, so now I'll move on to supplemental supply planning efforts for next year. We don't know what our 2022 CBP and state water, and also on the state end, we also don't know what the state water project allocation will be for next year, but they are likely to be very conservative or low to begin the season. We are currently looking into water transfers for next year in case conditions remain dry, but there is a great deal of uncertainty and volatility in the 2022 water transfer market if the drought continues. And we'll continue to monitor and work on this and provide more updates in the upcoming months. Next slide, please. So another effort that I want to touch on is that we're working on for next year is potentially wheeling transfer water to Marin, provided that our customers' needs are met first. And this will be transfer water that Marin would need to buy from a seller and not our water supply. We are close to signing the planning level memorandum of understanding, which will specify the term for the feasibility study, and that Marin will reimburse us for all of our costs. And last week, Marin's board did approve the MOU. And based on preliminary evaluation, we've informed Marin that we can potentially wheel up to 8 million gallons a day for them under certain conditions. However, we may need all of the Freeport capacity for our own needs. And we can't commit to wheeling for them through Freeport at this time. So MMWD is now looking into using the Hayward Intertie instead for a possible wheeling route. They will evaluate that. And Marin is also considering storage in Los Vaqueros through a possible arrangement with Contra Costa Water District. And I'll just take a pause and ask if there are any additional questions at this point.
It sounds like the presentation is still ongoing, but I do want to, you know, I think this issue does raise an issue that we should take some time to deliberate at the appropriate time. Where I understand we're all preparing for a potentially more severe drought in the coming year. We hope to see rain, but we need to be prepared. But I also think that over the long term, we need to make sure that if we're going to be providing the use of our infrastructure and enabling this expanded use of regional assets like this, that we need to have some common understanding amongst our neighbors about acceptable water use efficiency. And I'll leave it at that. I think that's a discussion that needs to be made more tangible and ascertainable. And I think that we should discuss that in the future.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the comment. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, so now I'd like to transition over to Andrea Polk, who will cover the remainder of this presentation, starting with the state's Save Our Water campaign.
Thank you, Linda. Good afternoon, President Linney and members of the board. I'd like to just review our communications for our water conservation, drought, and water supply status. So first, regarding the state's campaign, they have updated an advertising and media campaign, and we are partnering with them. So both public affairs and water conservation have identified spokespersons to work with them as they pitch some outreach to various media outlets. In addition, we continue to report our monthly water savings to the state, and that information is often covered by the media. Next slide, please. In terms of our customer outreach, we continue to reach out to our communities and the media. So we have done over 70 interviews so far on drought and water supply and conservation with the local media. We took the opportunity to do a press release the day that we began to supply Freeport, Sacramento River water through Freeport. And we got a lot of coverage as a result of that press release. We continue to do drought presentations and webinars, and our water conservation webinar topics, it's called Office, have been quite popular, and we've done some outreach on lawn rebate program and home leak detection, and we've done these both in English and Spanish. So these webinars offer us the opportunity to really offer some more in-depth information to those customers who are interested. Our September 30th fall garden maintenance webinar had just under 150 attendees, and we're going to continue to look at presenting more of these topics, and we're going to evaluate how best to move forward, meaning how often do we want to do it and what the future topics will be. Next slide, please. So regarding Freeport, again, we did the press release on October 4th, and we received coverage on many TV, radio, online, and print outlets. And we also, of course, updated the website, provided an FAQ to our call center and for use for the public, and reached out directly to our commercial and critical water quality customers to let them know. Regarding changes to releases at Moraga Creek, we did email the residents nearby along the creek to let them know of the changes. We also provided a post on Nextdoor and notified the local country club and the town and the homeowners association and local electeds about the changes to the levels in the creek. And we plan to provide an update to the Moraga Town Council later on this month. Next slide. So the Water Wednesday speaker series is one of many ways that we've been reaching out to our public virtually, and it's been really quite popular. The next Water Wednesday topic is going to be on water quality, which is very timely given our transition to supplemental supplies through our Freeport project. And the presentation will be held in English as well as in Spanish, with Susan Teefee, Stefan from the California State Board, and also Javier Ramos from our water quality team. Next slide, please. I wanted to give you a quick update on our social media presence specifically regarding drought and water conservation and water supplies. So overall on Twitter, which is one of our social media platforms, of course, we have shared 190 tweets. And of those, we continue to focus on a hashtag called Water Wednesday that's amplified by other agencies as ours, and our 16 Water Wednesday posts have generated nearly 17,000 impressions. Next slide. Facebook is, of course, a great way for us to reach our audiences. We find that many employees, retirees, partner agencies, and media often share these posts. And Facebook also offers us the option of interacting directly with customers who have questions or comments using the Facebook chat feature. We have posted more than 120 messages on Facebook this year, and we find it to be a really useful platform. Next slide. Nextdoor is the platform that we use to really provide more in-depth information or very targeted information to our customers. So it's really great for things like updating our project neighbors with construction updates. We utilize Nextdoor for posting about customer pipeline to encourage, we tease them and then encourage customers to go to the website to read the rest of the article. And we also use Nextdoor to promote webinars and events. Our Nextdoor post, for example, in mid-September that was used to advertise the conservation virtual webinar generated 50 RSVPs to the event. And it also provides us some good tracking information so we can see where those people are coming from. Next slide, please. And LinkedIn, I would say, is our most popular social media platform. We have our biggest following on LinkedIn, mostly because people really want to work for us. We use it also to promote our Water Wednesday speaker series with our experts. Next slide. Our YouTube channel is getting more popular as well, mostly because what we've been doing is recording these webinars and events, and we have them posted on our YouTube channel, which generates even more visibility for us. So the video recording of the Wednesday speaker series on drought, for example, generated 750 views, and people watch it for an average view time of 8 minutes. And that drought video was our most viewed YouTube video so far. So looking ahead to our social media presence, in this coming year, we'll continue to use analytics to refine what we post, when we post, and also when we might want to advertise. The advertising costs on Facebook, for example, are very inexpensive, and we find it to be quite effective. So we will work to continue to grow our engagement and focus more on use of videos and photography and stories to generate engagement. And we expect to go on to Instagram in 2022. So that is my summary of our communications outreach, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
No TikTok?
Not yet.
That was sort of a joke.
It is very popular. It's very true. There are some security concerns with TikTok, but we'll revisit.
What about Instagram?
Yes, Instagram, we plan to go onto that platform in 2022.
So Andrea, I find it a little bit hard to figure out where to find the stuff when I go to our website to try to navigate to the webinars that we've done or to others. And it just, I get a little bit lost in our website trying to figure out where do I go to find, you know, I guess I could put in the search bar Water Wednesday, but if I was a customer and I didn't know about Water Wednesday, can you help me understand what we're doing to help people find us in all of these venues, both from our website as well as with social media?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. And I would say that people, because we're all different, we all have different ways of navigating and searching for information. So one way, for example, is that we would post about a Water Wednesday on our social media platforms and have a direct link to the information. Another way to do it, as you described, Marguerite, is to put it in the search bar. Another way is to have it on the lower left of our website homepage. There's an events calendar, and so things, events like that and others are included typically in the lower left corner. And we also have it, I believe, on the Drought page and possibly on the Water Conservation page. So we can look at all of that again and just make sure that it's, we can maximize that visibility to make it as easy as we can for people to find those events.
So if I'm looking, I just went on the site and I'm looking at going back in the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
We can take this offline. I love that we're doing all of this. I can't take part in most of it when it happens. I need to kind of come back and look for it later. And I just sometimes wish it was a little bit easier to figure out or find where stuff is. But maybe it's just me.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Appreciate it. We'll look at that.
Yeah, it's not just you, Marguerite. It's confusing. I even, next door, for instance, I never see a post from East Bay Mud. And that covers at least 8 neighborhoods. It would be helpful. I know we have a lot going on right now, but it would be helpful after the first of the year if maybe staff gave the board a workshop on our various forums. So not only can we access it and understand it, but we can also be able to share that information with the people around us. So
Yeah.
that's for 2022, but I know I need it. So thank you.
So let me just make
Thank
a
you.
suggestion, share my trick for finding things on the East Bay Mud website, to Google them. which is not a small thing for our website to do, to have a good, search engine on Google for that. But, search Water Wednesdays, East Bay Mud, takes you right to the page. Same thing when I've looked for other things that, it's hard to navigate because there's so many things on our thing. How do you look at it and how do you find it? And again, the search bar is a good one, but just the Google.
Yeah, easy for you, Doug, but not for so many others.
I know it's not a great solution, obviously, for customers who don't think of that, but
and the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't believe, I'm not getting it. So I suspect a lot of them aren't as well.
But it's a backhanded compliment to our staff who I've tried to get my
staff
website
is wonderful. Yes.
on search engines.
But a
and
workshop
don't always show up.
would be wonderful.
So we'll take a look at that, our navigation, and then come back in early 2022 with a workshop on our different social media and website navigation.
I find sometimes it's just easier when you're doing Google, and I agree with you, Doug. You type in EBMUD, and then there's this whole mess of stuff that comes up. And yeah, you can go to our website, but you can also use Google to get to other places within us. I prefer our website.
Frank, I get putting in ebmud.com, but we're talking about neighborhood councils and other arenas. So ebmud.com is easy, obviously, but not the other form.
What I'm saying is you don't have to type in ebmud.com, just type in ebmud, and then Google shows all kinds of articles and stuff about East Bay Mud.
We'll work on it.
It's,
again, a compliment.
Still looking for my Dick Tracy watch.
for getting those things. I had a customer ask me, what about our gray water stuff? And I just, gray water, East Bay Mud, and I gave him the citation for it. Took me all 3 seconds. So
I would say a good starting point too during this era of drought is to share with your constituents ebmud.com/drought and sort of a ground zero for a lot of our communications and actions and what we're asking them to do during this drought time.
All right, thank you, Andrew.
Just sort of add this to the list of 2022. Every week we get our information memos, and you send out a periodic, communications report. Here's what was in the news. It might be helpful just to send, here are the hashtags that we use, sort of things that help us become. And again, this might be part of the workshop, but weekly, helpful URLs to share with constituents or to respond to questions or whatever, so that you're basically giving us the link to copy and tell people to navigate to.
Great.
Great idea.
Thank you.
Bill.
Director Patterson?
Go ahead, Bill, unmute yourself there.
I was muted. What I find is that all of our presentations and whatnot that we are doing currently are good. What my problem is, the mailed information with the bills or other information that can infiltrate from other areas. For people who are not set up, they don't have computers. You see, I have a lot of folk in my ward that don't see all this. They are not able to access. And getting information through to them is a key thing, because we do have many, many people who are not able to access our media equipment, all the stuff that we have that's sending them out. And they also need help. I find that community forums like NAACP, other groups that are meeting, I used to attend all those. When the COVID hit, I stopped going. And I've just been accessed again to come to some of those and help get the word out. So when we go to Martin Luther King Day or any of those activities within my ward, we have a table set up and we take material. East Bay Mud is there, and I'm grateful to the staff, because over the years, we've gone through this process together. And as the new kids on the block come out, and there are many of them now, new forums and whatnot, and they're having workshops and whatnot, I'm able to direct some of that information to our staff, so we make sure we cover those. That's what I'm saying, because it's not always the audience that you have access to via our setup, using the computer and using electronics, but it's the ones who do not communicate with you that way. And they too have an obligation to learn and to help conserve and to do all the things that we talk about, yet we don't reach them. And there's a new person appointed to the State Water Board. I'm hoping to meet next week or in the next couple of weeks, a new appointment by the governor of a black woman who has been appointed there, Yvonne. And she's anxious to talk to me for some reason. I didn't seek her out, but my name was given to her by somebody. So what I say going forward is going to be tempered, because I have to wait for the question. But I'm just saying, these are all opportunities for us to inject. I don't like the fact that because we have done all this work and research and planned and gotten to a position where we are water-wise, And in the face of a drought, we're in pretty good shape. I don't want that used against us to cut our water allocation because we're doing well. So I'm saying these are things that I wrestle with time and time again to say, how do we make an impact on those people who are making decisions that affect us, as well as how do we get the information to many of our residents, clientele, persons that we serve who don't have the means of communication that we have in our settings and take for granted that other people do. So that's all my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Fantastic feedback. Okay, thank you, Andrea. And just last, attached is the monthly report for September, and I can answer any questions if the board has any.
All right, well, let's move on to reports and director comments. Committee reports, minutes from the September 28th redistricting ad hoc and finance administration committees were included in the agenda packet. We will now receive a report from the October 1st Upper Mokelumne River Watershed Authority from John and today's planning committee. John, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Doug. We met on October 1st in Valley Springs. We had a quorum. We talked about the forest projects, the projects that or money is going to be coming in for the forest thinning through the Sierra Nevada Conservancy and forest program planning sessions in terms of looking forward to get more funds to be able to make our the forest more fire safe, which also make from the standpoint of water quality, it's important. We did take an issue that was under legislative under AB 1346 that was brought up by a member of the committee to send a letter asking the governor to veto it. He did not. Part of the concern was that under AB 1346 it specifically said that chainsaws and other motorized vehicles cannot be used on forest lands. I understand from the standpoint of air quality and those issues, but where the UMRWA board felt was, how do you fight a forest fire if you can't use the motorized equipment? And how do you do the forest thinning if you can't use motorized equipment? The governor did sign it, though. I saw that after the letter had been sent. So that's my report.
All right, thanks, John. Marguerite, planning committee.
Yep, we had 4 items for consideration today. We heard about a large pumping plant relocation project in East Oakland, the Fontaine pumping plant, which is going to be under design and development. There's a negative declaration being put out for review and comment, but actual construction on the project won't begin until 2028. So just to, sort of in the long range, but it's a large project. Includes replacing a pipeline, 1,800 feet of pipeline, moving the pumping plant from out of a fault zone into a more earthquake safe location, et cetera. Second had to do with another large improvements project, the Interceptor Level Monitoring Station and Overflow Structure Improvements Project. Just rolls right off the tongue, having to do with our the interceptors, so we receive water from stormwater from, or shouldn't be stormwater from our satellite agencies, and making improvements to that so that we have better monitoring and connectivity, remote sensing, et cetera, to help prevent overflows. Following out of that, the weather program update, our long-term program to come under the overflow levels and wet water treatment levels to decrease stormwater infiltration, et cetera. And then finally, Jimmy Oloye provided a presentation to help us, sort of understand the connection between our capital construction projects and contracts and the flow of that work and how it relates to each other, which is also a very helpful presentation, which I'd encourage folks to look at. All the reports were accepted unanimously, and yeah, it was very informative. And I don't know if other committee members have anything to add, but okay, that's it for me.
Thank you, Marguerite. Other items for future consideration, please submit items to the general manager. Are there any director comments? Doesn't look like there are any, so we're at the end of the road here. Thank you for everyone. It's a long meeting. Next regular meeting of the board will be held Tuesday, October 26th. That's in 2 weeks at 1:15 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned.